Hello, hello, and welcome once again. J76NY here. And we are going to be moving on to the next turn in our douchebag playthrough on Suzerain. Not really sure, I think it's episode 28. But we're going to go into the next turn and see what happens. See how Anton can make a mash of this and still come out on top. The will of the state. Hope you guys have been liking the playthrough so far. I've been having a whole lot of fun with this one. Looking forward to all the upcoming content that Torpor Games is putting out, and we'll definitely be covering that on the channel. So, let's get into today's episode here. See what we have to do. So far, not much. Read the paper. World leaders to gather at Alliance of Nations. Uh-oh. Calling for a session on the current affairs, world leaders will be gathering at Alliance of Nations next week. The main highlights from the upcoming agenda were announced, and, as expected, they will be around the current issues in Eastern Mercopa. In addition to the member states from the region, President Walker and Chairman Malignev will be delivering their speeches at the Assembly. All eyes will turn to Konstantium, Kryute, as the historic session will be taking place in the Alliance of Nations headquarters. Alright. Schedule for the Alliance of Nations. We have received the schedule for the upcoming Alliance of Nations session. According to the dates outlined, Swordland 1 is being prepared for the flight to Konstantium, Kryute. Minister of Foreign Affairs David Wissey will be attending the session, as well as accompanying Mr. Rayne on the flight, Mr. President on the flight. Alliance of Nations. Oh boy. Alright, here we go. I, David Wissey, and the rest of the Swordist delegation to the Alliance of Nations arrived in Kryute. Local police escorted us to the Alliance's headquarters in downtown Konstantium, immediately recognizable by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met with a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the third floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. So this is similar to the United Nations, or the I don't know, I think at that time at the in the 50s it would have been the fledgling NATO, but I don't think that really is pertinent here. Just continue on. I'll stop babbling. All the world's most powerful people under one gleaming dome. One wrong word and the world will go to hell, and I'm glad to be among them. Amazing how someone has managed to fill a room with people that absolutely loathe each other. Yeah. It's truly astounding. Humanity has come so far. That's sarcasm, David. How are you feeling, Anton? Being the president must have taken a toll on you and the family. We knew changing Swordland is hard, but we could never have expected it to be this way. We managed somehow. I managed somehow. Alright. It's tough to be the president, making harsh decisions and dealing with their consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. What you've done so far is more than enough. Don't treat yourself so harshly. For what it's worth, I appreciate all the advice you've given me. Don't worry about it. Your advice wasn't that good anyway. Well. Okay, douchebag. Your advice wasn't that good anyway, and I ignored it most of the time, so I guess that's a accurate choice there. That's where my own personal conscience comes into play, being dicks to some of these people, but I think I've gone a little too light in some circumstances where Anton could have just gone off the rails, but I just couldn't do it. So we'll try and make up for it in what's left of the our little story here. From the distance, you could see the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session is about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. Mr. Nines opened the session with a yawn and a short speech and called the first speaker to the floor. My great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address the Assembly. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked up to the podium as the Assembly applauded. Mr. President, it's my pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. See how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. And that made Mr. Wissy chuckle despite the fact that I just completely trashed him. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement. And see, this is what I get for trying to record this right towards the end of my day. Sorry about all the yawning. Start again. When I first spoke here, the message I gave was encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. While the challenges Eastern Marcopa and the whole world has faced since then, one has grown larger and more imminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table at Bogsland. I saw Emeric Hagel pounding his fist on his table in protest. Keep watching. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. The CSP, under the leadership of United Cantana, has been fueling Vogsland's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in eastern Marcopa. The world turned a blind eye when the armies of Vogsland occupied Helgeland, and they did not stop there. According to our intelligence reports, United Cantana made nuclear missiles were quickly deployed to the island. He pulled out a photograph. Even though it was hard to see from my position, I recognized it as an aerial image of Helgeland. We demand that the Chancellor speak the truth. As you can all see, we have evidence of the construction of silos. Yeah, this is huge. That's true, it's a threat to us all. I didn't expect them to be so quick after their operation. I don't blame them for looking concerned. Maybe we want to be on the good side of the guys with nukes. Oh my god, if I get through this, I'll be surprised. No Eastern Marcopan nation can accept the installation of weapons of mass destruction in the middle of our Markian seat. Emeric Hagel stood up and kept pounding his fists. We hereby call for the immediate dismantling and withdrawal of all missiles and other offensive weapons from Helgeland. We invite all the member states to support our call for a resolution in accordance with Article 11 of the Falanco Treaty. A lot of noise came from the Assembly Hall in response. Most of Western Marcopan delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist teachings. A state that wages war against its own innocent citizens, Wayland. That's a bunch of horseshit. Wayland's not even socialist. Innocent citizens. He's forgetting the violence of the BFF. Oh, we're not gonna go with the last two. He nodded disapprovingly. Well, I'm not wrong. At least from our perspective. Their purge of the minorities in their country was again largely ignored by the international community. I would go as far as to call it a genocide. Wayland violated our past treaties and mobilized their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders and authorizing them to partake in massacres. Lesbia was affected not only by the large waves of refugees coming from Wayland, but by the subsequent government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. We hereby call the member states to action against Wayland and its rogue government. Thank you. Wow. I'm not going to react to that. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Marcopian delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next speaker, the president of Wayland himself, Victor Smolak. Smolek stood up. As he walked past Patricio Alvarez, he brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. Very dramatic. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few seconds. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. Okay. I think the real chaos will start now. Sounds like I might be right. Victor turned to President Nines and bowed slightly. Mr. President, he then turned back at us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Kryute. And what do? They make threats, promote hate, and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Where is the cooperation and friendship? Where is the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow delegates, do not dare speak about Wayland before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past. Not entirely wrong. It's true that the Western powers had their hands in Wayland's civil war, but it doesn't justify the operation. Sorry, you already know my take on dealing with him. He doesn't like him. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Wayland Civil War, Arcasia made a deal with the United Cantana where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of our army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone in facing the genocidal Brutish Freedom Front, which the ATO funds together with Brumberg. Just like the delegate before me, I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Brumberg to the Brutish Freedom Front. They smuggled tons of Ka-74s in Wayland. They smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders. He's finally talking about it. We're not the only ones now. I should say something. Let Smolek know I'm on his side. He's got balls taking on Brumberg in the West like that. Or keep listening. Let's hear what he has to say. I could support him, but we're going to hold off for a second. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect this organization to do its task and investigate this property. I'm really sorry about all the yawning. It's like working on 16 hours a week here. Instead of leaving Wayland behind, as they have always done. Wanted to get this episode recorded for you guys, though. And I wanted to see what happens next, so here we are. Yawns and all. Coming back to the claims of lesbian representative. First, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Wesek forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to the militant BFFs, not the Bloods in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of the BFF, that your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Fourth, as the state, we only took what was ours. The companies the delegates spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Wayland by force. Know that Wayland will no longer recognize the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Wayland stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken. The enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now, I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connections of the West with the armed militants in eastern Maricopa. Oh, this could turn into a world war here. And I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what's right. Wayland only wants peace. Our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is Free Wayland or Death. The assembly roared, with particularly loud applause coming from the seats of Rican nations. I think that's the Ryza? It might be the kingdom from the next game coming out. Damn, that's a strong speech. He seems to be popular with Rika, doesn't he? Stand up and applaud his speech. I'm going to. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted the Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nines invited Martin Van Horten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fist. I could almost see his jaw trembling. He looks pissed. Can you blame him? Vogsland has just occupied Helgeland. Well, dude, we're about to take the side of Vogsland, so... I like this guy. Whatever. It's all business, right? Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly, and friends. It is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nations, and in particular Vogsland, have shown us what they're willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must sadly say the world has left us alone. We were one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation between Eastern Mercopan nations. Yet, when we were threatened by Vogslandian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voices indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't keep myself from wondering where he was when our lands were under invasion by the very socialist he spoke of. So here I am, asking for the support of the fellow members of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Vogsland. Loud banging noise emerged from the table of the Vogslandian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on the table. Keep watching. Mr. President, please moderate the assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Merritt Hagel began shouting curses as Nines repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled and Nines allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, Helgeland, which has been a territory of Agnolia for more than 3 decades, was invaded by Vogsland in a sudden attack. Not only did they unlawfully occupy our lands, they brought nuclear missiles to the island the moment our forces retreated. Alienist terror surrounds us on all sides. We must not falter. I invite all member states to find a resolution in accordance with Article 11 of the Phalanco Treaty, enforcing the immediate dismantling of all missiles from Helgeland. I must also remind you that under Article 3 of the Ventry City Treaty, the Alliance of Nations must ensure the withdrawal of occupied forces from the island. I call the democratic worlds to action against the tyranny of Malianism. Authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The banging noise started again. Isn't that Tarkin's soul? Oh, guess not. That can't be right. That's got to be Tarkin's soul. Maybe they're related, cousins or something. The banging noise started again. Hagel stood up and approached the rostrum. You're a spineless jerk, a lackey of Arcasian imperialism. President Nines called for silence and started hitting the gavel. Did the old man go? All of your complaints against us are a direct result of your capitalist and neo-colonialist systems. President Nines, please, what is this? President Nines smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Vogslandian delegates convinced Hagel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject. Everything is clear as day. Mr. Hagel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Vogsland and their corrupt ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegates. The two left the assembly hall. President Nines announced the next speaker, Merritt Hagel. Hagel immediately took his place and spoke in low, seething tones. Thank you. The Chancellor's time now. Like you're having fun, Mr. President. I am, David. Thank you for noticing. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Rika that have just joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they more than earned our membership vote. I am overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolution to the conflict that plagues us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Mercopa raised, pillaged, and exploited the continents of Rika and Xena, of which we cannot see on this map, but we know about because of Steam. Sadly, Voxland was also a part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the ideal of imperialism. But when our masses found their voice, the old colonial powers and their new financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolution. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course, they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs on the blood and sweat of their working class. Full-blown commie right there. Soon to be ally, if this plays out how I think it might. And now they have started labeling us the aggressors. Yet we all know it was the Arcasians who built up military bases all around Mercopa. It was the ATO that was first formed to fight against Malianism. I'll just keep watching with this. I don't know how I feel about what he's saying. Helgeland was, is, and will be Voxlandian territory. Our intervention in the island was completely justified. Mr. Delegates brought up the Falenco. I think that's supposed to be Mr. Van Horten. Whatever. He brought up the Falenco and Ventry City treaties. However, they are forgetting about the Treaty of Konstantium. Voxland exercises its right to intervene on behalf of our people who were being oppressed and massacred by the Agnolian government just because they did not recognize an appointed governor. They didn't get to elect one. We acted in full accordance with the second article of the treaty. If there's a side to be blamed, it's the state which murders its minorities for publicly showing support to our nation. There were also claims about illegal missiles. No country in the world has the right to determine what type of weapons we import. If there's a conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start with the Arcasian base on Ravnos Island. Lesbia has been housing Arcasian troops and missiles by our border for years, and none of the member states even talked about it. I also want the member states to look into the Arcasian bases in Lesbia. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they cannot stay silent about what the Agnolian government did in Helgeland. How could they look away? How they took away the rights of our people? Perhaps then, there can be proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. Sounds familiar. UN, China, several other permanent members of the Security Council. What? However, the Voxlandian government is ready, as always, to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. Oh. Yay. And said that. That Sordish? Did I catch that right? He said the revolution will come, yes, but it's an old Volgish. Very similar to Sordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent. Not an idiot, David. Most of the delegates from Xena, Rika, and Cantana responded with thunderous applause. Hegel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nines announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Uh-oh. Think we're about to get dragged into the shit ourselves here. Let's see what we got. Oh, so exciting. Excuse me. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world. Just as my fellow Eastern Mercopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continent, I also have to bring attention to a growing threat in our region, Swordland. Hey, that's me! As you know, not long ago, Swordish aircraft with offensive capabilities were spotted inside our borders. A few days later, they shot down one of our planes inside our own airspace. It was practically an act of war. Know this. Rumburg will do anything in its power to defend itself and its interest, whether Swordland is actually planning something or not. Our Swordish neighbors and what they've been doing is very concerning. They took in traitors and gave them protection. Their president himself came to power amid murder and unrest, yet people from his administration had the guts to blame our government for inciting violence. We have proof, bitch! And we're not the only ones. And they expect the world to believe their lies. I can't let her speak about us like that. Let's first hear her out. Come on, David. I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Swordland. If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust in Rumburg to take matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that Rumburg will not stand idly by if more Konstantium and Arcasian military are transferred to Eastern Mercopa. I hereby condemn both the CSP and the ATO for trying to influence our region with their military power. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I'm looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. What's that supposed to mean? Thank you. Grand awakening? That sounded like a threat. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President Nine spoke my name. Mr. Anton Rayne, President of Swordland, I invite you to address the Assembly. David immediately started applauding. Good luck, Mr. President. I walked up to the rostrum and took my place at the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. Thank you, Mr. President, fellow delegates. It's an honor to be here. Dear members of the Assembly, the representation of Swordland is pleased to address this Assembly. Thank you, Mr. President, fellow delegates. Anybody who ascends this rostrum must appreciate what a significant gathering he is addressing. The speakers who have preceded me have expressed their concerns about their problems. Swordland remains committed to the Alliance of Nations and the ideals that gave birth to it. We'll go with this one. I would like to stress the importance of these words, Alliance of Nations. We too are concerned about some of these problems and would like to expand on them. Yet we all know how often the noble ideals embodied in this charter remain unfulfilled, a concern not heard. I would like to stress the importance of these words, Alliance of Nations. Our century is a century of struggle for freedom, a century of liberation from foreign occupation. Our people are still not free from fear, not free from poverty or starvation. Our world is faced with dangers of division, the dangers of large military alliances and nuclear arms race. None of these really fit. Struggle for freedom, foreign occupation. There we go. We'll go with this one. Now it's more important than ever to set aside our differences and unite under this charter. It's time to ask the hard questions. Ask if this organization is achieving any of its aims. Today, we're confronted by a difficult choice. Our great achievements may either be used for the benefit or the detriment of mankind. Let's unite under this charter. Didn't seem like anyone really liked the Queen Livingston there, so maybe we could pull people to our side and then go give Rumberg a schlacken. Now I'd like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. I will not respond to any of these comments made today. I am absolutely going to respond to some of these comments made here today. It was earlier claimed that Wayland was involved in genocide. Such strong words shouldn't be spoken without proper evidence. We will continue our cooperation with Wayland. Swordland stands together with the Wessex people. I have to admit the operation resulted in many unnecessary deaths. I could completely confuse the shit out of them by going in 3 different directions in this speech, but Swordland stands together with its Wessex people. I would also like to extend my support for Mr. Van Horten. No. I would also like to address the Queen of Rumberg. Talked about some hypothetical threat that our nation poses to Eastern Marcopa, while Rumberg's military has tripled in the last decades. The real threat to Eastern Marcopa has always been Rumberg. Today it's still the case. Swordland always wanted to have peace between our nations, yet we're being threatened by Rumberg. We'll go bigger picture. Today it's still the case that Rumberg is a threat to everybody. It was Rumberg who shot down our aircraft within our airspace. We only defended our borders. The Rumberg craft was in our airspace. It was a tragedy that both our planes were shot down. Rumberg shot us down first. We were responding. I also have some evidence to show to the assembly. Mr. Smolak was right about the K-74s. True, we have evidence. Rumberg has definitely been arming the BFF in Swordland. We discovered that many militant groups in Swordland were being financed or armed by Rumberg. There's another important piece of evidence that we have here, provided to us by someone close to the Rumbergian government. That's the spy that they know about. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumberg and its links to rebel groups must be properly investigated. Alliance of Nations to support Swordland. We'll go with this one, see where it leads us. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumberg for blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. Go. Hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumberg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. Thank you for listening to our concerns. I wish to see a resolution from the AN soon. I wanted to go after her. They wouldn't let me go after her, though. The AN can no longer fail to ignore the machinations of the enemies of peace. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Swordland and Eastern Marcopa, just as those in other continents. If the right actions are not taken, it will be quite evident that international relations cannot continue on such basis. The Alliance of Nations can no longer fail to ignore the mechanism. Okay, we'll just go with that one. There cannot be any more procrastination or delay. The AN must adopt decisions according to the wishes of the people of the world. People of Swordland and I are honored to express our concerns. Here we go. A Morgana West Corps. There was some applause from the assembly. Thank you. I left the podium. I walked back to my seat. David did not stop applauding until I sat down. How was it? It was not a bad speech, Mr. President. You did well. Not exactly gushing, but whatever. President Nines announced the next speaker, Dwight Walker. Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. This guy again? Arcasia. All right. Hang on. Don't mind me. I'm just looking for Arcasia. What the hell? Where are they? Oh, whatever. Mr. Secretary, delegates to the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, fellow friends. We meet again on our quest to bring peace and light into this world, but even though some of the clouds have lifted, the world has not yet escaped the darkness. The Guntanan Security Pact is rapidly expanding its influence. That's like the Warsaw Pact. We'll just say Warsaw Pact. It's very troubling to see a democratic nation of Mercopa be invaded by the Malianist powers. I refer, of course, to Helgeland's occupation by Volksland. This is an attack against the lasting peace the world has enjoyed since the century of revolutions. Today, our peacekeeping obligations are being tested by United Kantana and the Malianist bloc. If we fail to counter and stop this threat, if we stay idle and allow them to build new walls and weapons of hostility, if the attackers do not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believed we had built will be the world's downfall, and posterity will point its finger at us for not stopping it. Merc Hegel and the other Volkslandian delegates started flipping out again. This time Hegel had taken off his shoe and was banging it on the table with it. I'm just going to keep watching. Despite the noise Hegel made, President Walker continued his speech without pause. Despite its claims, the CSP's actions will not only bring about war, will only bring about war. Okay. We believe United Katana and Arcasia, together with their allies, could come to an understanding for our mutual benefit and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. Yet United Katana keeps acting in complete disregard to international law. Their allies are forcefully taking land and imposing their own values on the people of these lands. I will say this to the leaders of United Kantana. If either of us is to be secured, we need a peaceful cooperation, not nuclear missiles, shows of naval superiority, or invasions. If the leaders of United Kantana fail to demilitarize Helgeland with complete dismantling of the nuclear missiles and the withdrawal of the occupying Volkslandian forces, the ATO will have to take matters into our own hands. Hegel stood up with a shoe in his hand. What is that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations? Mr. President, this cannot. Nine slammed the gavel down and shouted, "Silence, please." Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We did not interrupt you when you addressed the Assembly. Finally, I propose that the Alliance of Nations undertake the noble cause of helping the people of the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its Human Rights Declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organization. Its size and duties are increasing enormously. It should adapt to the changing world. But peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organization alone. They rely on the hearts of people and the spirit of cooperation between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve a lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the Assembly applauded his speech, the ATO delegates in particular. That speech had very dangerous connotations to it. It did, actually. Yes, I hope we won't be seeing a direct war between superpowers anytime soon. That would be the destruction of the planet. The applause continued for some time. Walker shook hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Nines announced the last speaker before the break. Oh boy. It was Leon Malianev. Jesus, look at this guy. Malianev slowly walked to the rostrum in his iconic suit. All of the CSB delegates stood up and applauded him. It's a hell of a chin you got there, bro. Honorable Chairman and fellow delegates to the Alliance of Nations. Here we are again at the most esteemed meeting of state representatives in the world. However, increasingly we are being threatened, disregarded, attacked, or ignored in this assembly. The representatives of Arcasia has just shown this unfriendly attitude toward us yet again. Arcasia would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace, yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and our growing base in the developing world. Peace through strength, deterrence. It's not exactly a unproven concept. The OTO kept waging wars against people's revolutions and forcing new independent states to be their puppets, blinding them to themselves through the Arcasian lira, binding them. Oh, I need to go to bed. Now yet another Arcasian president is telling us that we are the aggressors and they are the keepers of peace. We will not be silent anymore against these lies. When was this peace you talked about? Where was this cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? If you don't like us, don't accept our deals. Don't listen to our concerns and keep pointing fingers at us. Why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Katana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people. People who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. Whether you like it or not, we'll keep representing the laborers, the slaves, the oppressed of this world. And believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us. Come and see the revolution working in Katana. Show our continent to your people without distorting the reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end. Such is the logical conclusion of the development of humankind. This time, lesbian delegates started laughing very loudly. Some other delegates booed. Keep watching. You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you. Suddenly, the laughing turned into shouting. If you really believe in cooperation, we will be waiting. We're not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural that the CSB would react. Despite threats from the ATO, Rumberg, or any other nation or organization, we must not succumb to further division and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do the people of our countries expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and a better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions and complex problems, but the leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations and succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Let us act in such a way to make this session not a session of threats, a little late, buddy, but a session of hope and the realization of them. The government of United Katana and the United Peoples of Katana are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution. I'm going to applaud. Why not? The assembly broke into massive applause. Looks like I chose right. The applause continued for some time. Malyanov slowly walked back to his seat as the president announced a break. That was a lot. Yes, David. Yes, it was. Let's grab some lunch. Lead the way. We walked out of the hall to have some lunch and fresh air. Outstanding. Oh, that was a slog. And it was 45 minutes of a slog. So that's going to be the episode for today. It was pretty interesting, actually. I gotta admit, the meeting of all the world leaders, how it played out. You could see the kind of, I don't want to say alliances forming between certain countries, but I can see a direction where some side here, some side there. From what I could tell from that, Rumburg's not very well liked. We don't seem to be much better liked, but we got some applause, and we're not the only ones up against Rumburg, and it looks like this United Cantana is not exactly fond of them either, so we'll see how this one plays out. Anyway, if you like this episode, hit the like button. Once again, apologies for all the yawning. If you want to follow along when I'm a little more awake to be reading a video game, hit the subscribe and come along with us. This isn't going to be the last Suzerain series I have on my channel, so if you want to keep up with that, hit the subscribe, hit that bell, do all that good stuff. Let me know what you think about the game. Let me know what you think about the episode. Pretty curious. I'm really enjoying this playthrough, and I'm really looking forward to continue it in the next episode. J76NY saying thank you very much for watching, and have yourself a very good night. Good night.